Well, if you guys, I don't know if you follow any type of sports or baseball in particular is what I'm thinking of right here, but probably the greatest comeback, I would think, maybe there's some other ones, but I was looking it up, and this may be one of the greatest comebacks, and this was back in '04 in the postseason. This was with the Red Sox and the Yankees were playing. Now, neither one of them are my team. I'm actually a Rangers fan. I'll cheer on the Astros too. But it was probably one of the greatest comebacks ever, because if you know the history of really the Red Sox, they hadn't won a World Series since, it was at 1918. It had been so long, and it's what they call the curse of the Bambino, which that was another name for Babe Ruth, one of his nicknames. And so they sold him off, and I think it was like they won the World Series, and it was like 2 years later they sold him off, and then so began the curse. It was like so many years back to 2004. Anyway, they'd never won. It'd been like one of the longest droughts in history. Them and the Cubs were there, and it going on for such a long time. And so this was in 2004. They're in the postseason. The evil empire, the Yankees are like the ones that are supposed to win this all. They're up. It's a best of 7 series in this postseason right before the World Series. They're up 3-0. And it's in the 4th game. They're about to wrap it up. It's 4-3. They're bottom of the 9th. They're about to beat them off. At this time. Let me get this going here. About to beat them off. It's 4-3, and it's in the bottom of the 9th. And the Yankees have in one of the greatest closers in all of history. I think he's considered the greatest closer in history. So you just can't write this any better. Mariano Rivera is on the mound. He's going to close this thing out. But they ended up getting a score, so it tied it out. So they end up going to the 12th inning of this postseason game, and David Ortiz hits a home run. The Red Sox win it. They're not done, so it's 3-1. And they go on. I think the next game they even went into like 14 innings, and the Red Sox won. Anyway, they didn't lose again. They went on to win. I mean, the Yankees have been blowing them out. The game before that, this 4th game, they put up, I think it was 19 runs. I mean, they were blowing them out. It was all but over. And so they go, and the Red Sox end up winning this out. They go on to the World Series and win 4 straight games and just win, and they break the curse of the Bambino, and they've won. I think they won like 2 since then. Throughout that. Now I'm just waiting on the Rangers to win 1. But anyway, that's not the story, what it's about. It was a great comeback, one of the greatest comebacks in history. And so I think about that, just like with underdogs and like stories, like you think that it's completely over and nothing is ever going to come good out of this. And I think about that with the guy we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at this guy named Joseph from the Old Testament. It's a wild, really roller coaster of a ride. If you know anything about his life and what happens and what was going on there. We've been going through Hebrews chapter 11, and now we're up to this guy. And that's what it was. His life was just this roller coaster of all these things that happened, and you just look at it and you think, man, this is just some story. This is something that's made up. There's no way this could be good in life. Like this really actually happened. And then you look at the things that are happening to him, and each time all these things happen, you're just thinking, this is all over. There's no way that anything good can come out of this. And so we're going to talk about that today as we've been going through this faith series, and we've been talking about these people and the amazing just persistence that they had. But it was their faith. It was them trusting in God. It wasn't anything that superpowers that they had in themselves. It was just their faith in God and God using them. And God telling us, I want you to trust in me in faith. I'm the one that's going to be doing all these things, and I want you guys to trust me. And so that's what's happening here with Joseph. I want to talk about him. Here's the deal with Joseph. He is the favored son of his father Jacob. He's the favored son. If you know anything about, like, maybe you were the favored kid. I don't know how it was. I don't know if you had this very well-known favored sibling or whatever. It doesn't ever go really well. It doesn't go well when it's very well known. This is something like, it's not just something you keep in secret. His brothers knew that he was the one that his father favored, because if you know anything about Joseph, he had this coat of many colors. Like it was literally this coat that had these many colors. You could see this. You could see the colors. You could see them coming from a distance. I got to imagine when you look at the story, but they knew it had these long sleeves. It was very well known. It was something that like dignitaries wore. It was just something that he probably shouldn't have had when his brothers didn't. They knew he was the favorite son. And because of this, there was hatred for Joseph. They hated him. They knew that he was his father's favored one. And so this is the story of him. We're going to kind of get into this. I'm not going to read in Hebrews, but I want to jump us all the way back to Genesis chapter 37. Now, you guys can read on this. There's quite a few chapters in this. You guys can read on this. Like I've said before, going out through the series, I'm going to kind of skim over this a little bit. You're not going to see all these things in them, but go back and read this for yourself because there's quite a few stories. There are quite a few chapters in this. But I want to read here in Genesis chapter 37, verses 5 through 8. Again, he's the favorite son. His brothers hate him because they see this. And this is what's happening here. He comes to them. He says, Joseph had a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, and this is really why, he said, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. He's like, that's crazy, huh? Can you guys see with my shiny coat? His brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. So again, that's what I picture. I don't know if Joseph is nothing in there really shows us that he's being kind of cocky in what he's saying to him. But you got to know, it's very visible that his father has him as a favorite son. He's from his favored wife, which is even a weird thing to say right there. But, it's just, he's favored in so many ways. It's like, I don't know, it'd be like if my parents had bought me like a Ferrari and then my sisters, it was like, a non-working tractor. It's like something's off on the balance here. Mama, something's weird here. But that's how it is. It was very well known. And they hate him. And now he comes to him and he gives them this dream, this vision of, okay, I'm rising up and you guys are like bowing down to me. This is kind of weird, isn't it? It's kind of crazy. And so that's what's happening here with his brothers. And that's why this is kind of building up in him. He just kind of strolls up in his I'm better than you type of coat and tells him this story and what's happening right here. If that wasn't enough, if you're reading this, you're thinking, don't tell him anymore, Joseph. He goes on in verses 9 through 11. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father, as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So his dad's maybe thinking, well, maybe this is right, and you can see his brother's like, are you serious? He's telling us we're going to bow down to him. He's already your favorite. We know this, and you're just going to go along with this, and there's just building up this tension going on in his family. His brothers hated him. So that's kind of the context of what's happening here. You see the story of what's going on. And what we're going to see in this story, and if you know about Joseph, is this awesome story of God being able to take this horrible situation and turn it around to kind of rework it for his good, which all of us need to see. So many times in our life, all this stuff is going on, and he can rework this stuff. Every time I approach things like this, I know we all go through something that's a little bit different, something that's hard, maybe nobody else can relate with you, but there's always these things where we can see where God can redeem this. He can use some type of story, work it around. Doesn't mean that he makes some bad situation happen, but that he can rework something for his good. He's sovereign. He's in control of all that, and he can do these things. And you see that throughout this story, even though it's really tough. He can bring this around to his ultimate good. But I think we can also see what we might be in the situation of his brothers right here, in that if we don't check our anger, if we don't watch this, and don't let it get so elevated that we can become like them and do something that you can't take back, something that is horrible, that is going to change someone's life, someone that's going to change our life. If we're not careful, we can come to that bad decision where our anger can be so elevated that we're going to do something like what they did right here. And that's what I think we see. So this is what I think about with Joseph's story. Have you guys ever read, it's a kid's book, it was, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Anybody remember that? Yep, yeah, we're all like, yes. I was a little bit too excited there, but that's all right. Yes, I'll get that for you. But I was going to call this cheesy, but Joseph and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad, 13 years. Because if you don't know the story, it was actually 13 years and not a day. And back to the story. No, it was 13 years. It was a long time. It wasn't just a day. It wasn't just a week. It wasn't a month. It wasn't even just a year. It was 13 years that all of this happened. All of this horrible situation happened. Okay, granted, he's the favorite son right here. He's got this shiny coat and all this, but it's going to be a horrible situation that happens right here. Again, it's a long period of time, 13 years. And I see this with him. And so the main way I want to encourage you guys as we look at this is just to give you confidence and trust that even though you may be going through that, God is always still there. Our temptation is he's only there if everything is going perfectly. When something happens, when difficult things happen, when relationships break up, whatever it is, all these different things, it must be that he's left us or he's not there. He's not doing exactly what I thought, so he's not good. And I want to encourage you that he is there. He's doing some things. I can't tell you what he's doing, but he is there. And so if you want, just write this down. Our job, just a simple thing here, our job is just to trust him. Very simple thing. I want to keep it at that. I want us to understand that because you're going to come to that place when I think that every one of us come to that place when it's not going the way that we want. At least this is how I am. When it's not exactly going the way that I want, I'm tempted to kind of push things along in my way. You know, like I feel like this is what God wanted to do, and then it starts not going exactly the way I want, and I want to kind of push it along. We saw that a little bit even with Abraham and Sarah. I wanted to push things along. I want to change things and make it the way that I want it to be, rather than it's a simple thing for me, I know, to say, but I believe that's what he's telling us is our job is just to trust in him, whatever that is. Just trust in him. Let me look at this verse because I think this can help us out on that. Romans 8:28. It says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. So, I mean, this is a promise for his people. It is. For those who love him, for those who trust him, for those who are for him, he works things out for the good of, for his plan. It may not be exactly the way that you want, but it works around for his plan, which is the ultimate good, which is for our good. So that's what I want to encourage you guys with. I'm not saying I know exactly how it's going to be, and there have been times when I'm like, this is how it needs to be, and this is the perfect good plan, and it doesn't go that way, and it goes another way, and maybe in the middle of it, I'm questioning, and I'm kind of mad, I'm trying to push it over to this, and it's like, that's not right. And then when you kind of, maybe you've been there, you kind of let go, and you just let it play out the way that God is trying to see it, trying to make it happen. It is better that way. You see that. I know that. It's always easier to look back and see it, but I know in the middle of it, though, that's the tough part. I'm with you there. This world is broken. This world has sin. This world is evil all over it, all the time. But God can use those terrible things. He can use our situations, our terrible things, to work them around for the good. Do not forget that. I want you guys to remember that. He can use those horrible situations for that. And again, we see that here with Joseph. So here's the rest of his story. I mentioned he comes up. His dad sends him out there at this one time, says, I want you to go check on your brothers. You know, and this is the way I picture him. They see him coming from a long ways off, probably because of his coat. You know, like you see this color blur, however that was. But they see him coming, and they're mad. They're already hating him and all this stuff. And as he's coming from a distance, walking up to him, they start plotting out, how can we kill him? This is where they've got to. They've gotten to this place where they're like, we got to get rid of this guy. I hate him. I hate everything he's about. I hate that he's the favorite son. It's been elevated so much that they're at this place now where they've changed so much and they want to see their brother dead. They hate him so much. They're plotting this out. But one of the brothers, Reuben, is actually in some way he's thinking a little bit clearly, and he's like, we can't kill him. He's our brother. We shouldn't shed blood. We cannot do this. And so he's trying to save him. At that point, he's kind of the savior for him. He's the only one thinking a little bit clear, like, we can't kill him. He's our brother. And so his plan was, okay, he's telling him, he's trying to think on the spot right there. He's like, let's put him in this cistern. Let's put him in this hole, this kind of well here, and just leave him there. And his plan was like, okay, I'm going to leave. And everybody goes, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to save him. I'm going to bring him out of there. They're thinking kind of crazy now. Maybe he's like, I don't want to be in the same place as him. Maybe my brothers will kill me. And this. So I don't know what he's thinking, but he's going to try to save him. So he leaves, and they're there, and they stopped. You know, they're like, well, okay. I mean, he's probably right. We shouldn't kill him. He is our brother. But look, there's some merchants coming by. Let's sell him into slavery. This is where they're at. Like, okay, we're not going to kill him, but sell him into slavery to these guys. And that's what they do. Reuben's gone, thinking he's going to come back and find him. And they have sold him now into slavery to these merchants coming through. This is the place where these guys are at. This is the evil that's happening. And they're just this hatred. And they sell their brother off into slavery. And so begins Joseph's crazy 13-year trial, these temptations, these things that God is going to be using him, and he's going to test his faith through that long period of time. And this was a horrible situation that's going through here. His journey begins. And this is the question I think comes up many times when I'm in that, and maybe it's you guys too, is how is this part of your plan, God? That's what I would say. Like, this is us, I think, to God. This is me sometimes. I'm like, how is this part of your plan, God? Have you ever been there in something like that? Maybe I've been there multiple times. I think I have. When I'm there and I think everything's going good, and then something comes and I'm like, how is this part of your plan, God? Because I'm not omniscient. I don't have all knowledge. I don't know all that stuff. And I'll ask those things to God. And I bet you've been there with me. God, how is this part of your plan? And I got to think that this is where he is. I don't understand this. Why would you do this? You might not have this particular story, but in some way in your life, I think you question him so often like this. Let me say this. Listen to this, because I think this is important right here. It's another point I want to write down. It's kind of a long point here, but I want you guys to get this. Don't let your joy, happiness in your life be defined by your circumstances. Does that make sense? Don't let your joy, your happiness in your life be defined by your circumstances, what's happening around you. That is so easy. Again, that's another thing I can say. It's easy for me to just write it down up there and say that and just like point to you and say, don't do that. That's me. It's like, I'm the same way. It's like, whatever's happening, it's so easy to just let that control me. Whatever's happening around me, kind of control me. It's like, this isn't what I thought. I'm serving you. How can this be happening? Why are you allowing this? Why isn't it going the way that I wanted? Why isn't it going perfect? Why did this happen? And all these questions come up. And I'm just saying, I think we've got to understand that is don't let those circumstances control our happiness and our joy that we have in Christ. Don't let that control you. And I think that's important, because when you do that, this is something I'm learning. When you do that, when you can kind of start figuring that out and start following him and not letting those circumstances control you, it changes your life. It changes your perspective on the life, on the world. Somebody else can go through the same situation as somebody else, but if you learn to do this, if you don't just let those circumstances control you, your life is different. Your joy is there, your happiness is there, that is found in Christ, not in those things that are surrounding you, not in what is happening in your life. Paul said this. This is in Philippians 4, and we went through this series a few months back. But I really like these verses. It's probably one of the most well-known verses in Philippians. Philippians 4, 12 through 13. He said, remember, he's in prison when he's writing this, okay? He says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret to being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. We quote this verse a lot of times, and I think many times it's quoted out of context. We use it, we have it, like we mark it down, we get, we tattoo it or put it on the walls, or we have it under our eyes, in football. It's like, I can do everything. I can beat these guys. I can win. I can get this job. I can do these things. And it's always just about, almost like it's a good luck charm. I just got to quote this, and this is going to happen to me. And you put it in context, really what he's talking about. Again, look, Paul's in prison, and he's saying, no matter what comes to me, no matter what struggle, no matter what things, I'm in prison right here. This is not the ideal situation. This is 20 years ago. I didn't think I was going to be in prison doing this. He says, I'm going through all this, but I think that's what he's saying. These circumstances aren't going to control my happiness. All these things are happening to me, but I'm not going to lose strength. And he can do that. He can face all these things because of his faith in Jesus, because of the strength he gets from Jesus. And I think that's what he's talking about right there. He's not saying you're not going to go through anything. The guy who wrote this is in prison, and he's encouraging people. You may go through tough things, but he's saying, look, you can go through this and have the strength from Christ. It's by faith in him that can get you through all this stuff. So the same people can go through the same things, but this perspective that you have and this faith you have in Christ or not changes everything. The same situation there. And I think that's what he's talking about there. And I think it's important for us to really learn about that. So now Joseph's story, he's sold into slavery to these merchants. Okay, this is just not an ideal situation. I mean, his brothers have wanted him killed, but okay, now he's not killed. Now he's sold into slavery. And you got to think this guy is just like, man, when can this end? This is a horrible thing. And in chapter 39, if you go and read, it says in there that whatever he did, I think it says it a couple times in there, whatever he did, God gave him favor in it. Whatever Joseph did, God gave him favor. And it says it in there a couple of times, and I think that's important for us to really remember in that. But I got to think that there was some temptation that as he's going through all this, that he's like, God's giving me favor in this. Like, I've been sold into slavery wrongfully. My brothers did this. They wanted to kill me. Now I'm sold into slavery. But whatever Joseph did, God gave him favor. And so he's there. He's in this guy's house. I mentioned that a minute ago, that I think two people can go through the very same thing, and completely different outcomes can come. Someone who's pessimistic can see this outcome and just completely either turn away from God and say, this is not how I thought it was going to be. Just look away and have no faith in him. And somebody else going through the same thing just has faith in God and looks at it like I think Paul was doing there and says, you know what? I'm going to trust in God. This will not control me. This situation right here will not control me. God is doing something through this. I don't know what it is. This makes no sense to me. Everyone's telling me to quit and to turn away from God, but I believe he's going to do something out of this. This may not be good right now. I don't like this. This is painful, but he's going to do something through this. And that's what I said. Two people going through the same thing, and it depends on our faith in God. It depends on our relationship with him. Amen. And that's so important for us to really get right there. So look, here's where Joseph is. He goes in there. He's being sold. So it's a little bit better. Now he's sold to this guy named Potiphar, who's an official for Pharaoh. And he's in his house. He's got a little bit of favor with him. He's there in his house, and he puts him in charge of everything because he sees, hey, this guy is trustworthy, and he can take care of everything. And it was really just like, you can't have my wife and I think like his stuff, but he's in charge of everything in that way. So you think, well, this isn't really a terrible story right here. Except that Potiphar's wife, we don't know her name, we just call her Potiphar's wife, throws herself at him, and she wants to sleep with him. So that's what's happening. So you see in there, and he has integrity though. Potiphar's not around, she's there, and she's like, this guy's a slave. Like, he needs to do what I want. I'm Potiphar's wife. He needs to be with me, and she continually throws herself at him. And he continually rejects. He has this integrity, and he stays back. He doesn't do anything. One time she throws herself at him and ends up pulling his coat off, and he runs off. I mean, he's fleeing for his life from her. He's like, I'm not going to do this. And so naturally, what happens? Well, he's commended. Potiphar comes in, and he's like, great. You did awesome. This was a test. You passed. I'm going to give you half all my stuff. No, he didn't say that. He went in there. She's mad at Joseph because no one says no to Potiphar's wife, I guess. I don't know. And he does. And so she goes back there and she says, look, here's his coat. He threw himself at me. She went to her husband and lied about this and said he tried to force himself on me. Oh, just get rid of him. And he's mad and he's going to believe his wife. So he throws Joseph in prison. So again, you see this situation. He's doing the right things. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been there doing the right things? I know I've been there, and I tried, and I was doing the right stuff, and then it just seemed to be messier, and you're like, man, it seems better to do what they're doing. When they're lying, they're cheating, they're doing the wrong things, and they seem to be doing better, and yet here I am. And I think that's the same thing with Joseph right there. He's like, I'm continually following God, and the question really comes up again. I said it a minute ago. How is this part of your plan, God? It's a question we ask. How is this part of your plan, God? I thought about this, and he's actually not here. I was going to talk about one of the guys here, Travis. He's sleeping because he's working. But this is a story for me. I thought it was really cool. As some of you guys know, with the story, I think about with Joseph here. He had a good job. He was just taking care of his family. Really good paying job. Really good. And from what I've heard from him on the story, it was like, there was something that he came into him, talked to them, he was honest about something, and you figure like you're being honest in there, it's going to be good, you're going to go well in your job, and he was honest with them, and they ended up letting him go. Now here's the story, kind of the backstory on all this is Tanya, she's back there too, neither one of them are here, and I'm talking about it sounds like I'm gossiping and stuff here, but she was praying, she wanted him to get into church. He wasn't in church, he hadn't been coming. He was taking care of his family, making money, but he was gone all the time, he had nothing to do with God, and that's where it was, and he was staying back. And she prayed. This is what I think is cool. She prayed, God, I wish he could just be in church more. And I remember her praying that. And this is funny. Like, I tell you, pray about this. It's not always going to go exactly the way that you think. But she prayed that. God, I just want to see him in church more, thinking maybe like they'll cut back on some hours, like he won't be on the weekends. He can be here and something like that. No, he gets fired. They let him go. What happens? well, he can be in church more now. He doesn't have a job. And that's what happened. He was around, and I know it was tough, but it took him that point, like, to bring him back into church. He was looking for a job, didn't know what he was going to do, and he was looking around kind of helping people, and it put him into the position that he's doing now, is he's kind of starting his own business, going around working and doing construction and building things and just all kinds of stuff, and whatever he can do, and it's just kind of growing in so many ways. But I love how that happened, how God like takes something away, and you don't think it's going to be the way that you think. You think it's got to go this other way. I'm praying for this, and God's like, okay, I'm going to answer that. It's not going to be the way you think, and I'm going to do this. It may be painful at first. It may be difficult, and I'm forcing you to pray to me. I'm forcing you to strip all this stuff away and see me. And that's what he does. Sometimes it takes that. God is not always going to make it really easy on you. Sometimes he does make things so difficult for you. This is what we say wrong in the church sometimes. God won't make it anything too difficult for you. He will. He does. Sometimes he makes things so difficult for you because out of his grace, he says, this is what it takes for you to drop down on your knees and to see me, because right now, if you keep going the way that you're going, you're going to be away from me forever, and that's not a good situation. And so he forces us sometimes. He allows it, and that's the grace of God. And I see that. Maybe that was happening here with Joseph and what's going on. Remember, he's wrongfully put in prison. Okay, so now he's in prison now. He's gone through all these things. It's this up and down kind of roller coaster ride. And he's in there, and he meets these guys, this cupbearer and this baker who were part of Pharaoh's crew. And they have these dreams, and they want them interpreted. And it works out for the cupbearer, but not the baker. They tell him the dreams, and and the cupbearer, he's like, oh, you're going to be restored, you're going to be back to the king. And then the baker tells him his, and it's like, you're going to get out of here, but you're going to die. So it wasn't really good. And so it happens. He goes up there, and it turns out the exact way that he said. They get out, they go, baker dies, cupbearer is there, he lives. And remember, he tells them, he's like, just guys, remember me when you get out of here. Sure, we'll do that. And they forgot. And it's like, man, Joseph keeps going through all this stuff right here, never can get a break, and that's what always happens. This is what I would say about this. I think I said this last week. Whenever we're being tested, when you're having to express some faith, like just talk about the beginning point of expressing faith, there's always some time in between when God answers, when he sees you through that, like there's that faith point. And I can't tell you, like, how big of a period here. Like here, it was 13 years for this time. I'm not going to say like yours is going to be 13 years, a year, a week, or whatever. They're all different kinds. God knows. He knows what he's doing. But there's always that beginning point. And there's time between expressing faith and God answering. There's always some time, a period in there. And I would argue that this is necessary. It's necessary for us to go through this. It's hard. We all want to try to figure out a way around it. And like there's got to be some loophole where I don't have to go through this. But I'm telling you, like in the Christian walk, what he says, it's going to be difficult. People are going to be against you. This is necessary. Whatever this time period is. And it's not just going to be this one time, like, you pass the stone, like, I don't have to do it again. Beth will tell you that. There's so many. It's not a one-time thing. There may be many of them. Many times that you have to go through this faith process, and I don't know how long that's going to be. But it's in this period we do the most growing. Or we turn away from God. I mean, it's obviously it's up to us. It's our choice. It's difficult. It's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not trying to downplay it in any way. But I'm saying that this is necessary, that we have to go through this. If we're going to grow, if we're going to be the person that I think God is trying to make us be, that he's trying to mold us into being, that he's trying to say, this is where I want you to get to. I want you to go through that. It's absolutely necessary. So what happens? Kind of wrapping up the story there. Maybe Pharaoh has a dream. I have a dream. I've been wanting to say that. He has a dream, and no one can interpret it. He's like, okay, get all the magicians, get all the wise guys, not the mafia, and brings them in there. And he's like, somebody interpret this. And nobody can interpret. They don't know. We don't know what this means. And then at that time, it's like the cupbearer's like, wait, when I was in prison, I don't know why I completely forgot about this, but there was a guy in there, and he interpreted our dreams, and it turned out exactly perfect. He knew it. And so they bring him out. He interprets this dream, and it had to do with cows and 7 years, different numbers. And it was about, he interpreted this right, and it was like, there's going to be 7 years of abundance of crops. And then there's going to be 7 years of this famine. And so he told them, and he said, you need to stock up. You need to prepare in this abundance and like take all this in and prepare, because it's going to be horrible at this time. There's going to be people all around that aren't going to be ready for this. And he does. He interprets this. And just long story short, Pharaoh moves him up to second in command over all of Egypt. And you see this long process, and what a crazy process from where he came from. And you go back to his dreams, which made his brothers mad, but now you see what's happening. It was fulfilled in this. And you can go on and read this. I wasn't planning on talking a whole lot about it. But his brothers come from their land. There's a famine. They go there. Joseph, is in command now, and they're going there asking for stuff. They don't know the brother's alive. I'm sure for 13 years, however long it was, they've just been in regret and all this remorse and all this stuff. And now they're going there pleading with this guy, not knowing it's his brother, their brothers, and they're asking for stuff. We need help. We need all this. He messes with them a little bit, and you see how this happens. He eventually tells them it's him, and they're just remorseful, and they feel terrible and all this stuff. Anyway, he brings his whole family there, and just all this that happened in this crazy story of what was happening all the way back there in this horrible situation where his brothers wanted to kill him. And it's like he goes on and he says, you know what you guys intended for harm. God was using this. That's what he was saying, is that God was using this for his good. And so he didn't have any more hatred. And like, he wasn't mad at them. He didn't kill them and all. He could have done this stuff. He's like, he realized, I think as he looked back, man, that was horrible, you guys. I got some stories and, it was crazy. But this is what God had intended, to bring me to this point so that all this could happen, so he could use me in this way, bring the family back. What an amazing story. So I want to encourage you guys with that. I don't know all the things that you're going through, you're going to go with, what's going to happen in your life. We come to church, and sometimes we just need to hear stories like this, and then later on, you're going to be faced with some situations. But we go to Scripture and we read this to encourage us. So I don't know what all it is that you're facing or you're going to face. But if I can encourage you in any way, it's just hang on. Cling to God at all costs. Whatever is happening, whatever you're facing, whatever difficult scenario, whatever is happening in your life, even if it doesn't make sense, even if everyone is telling you to turn away from God, hang on there. Cling to God. Trust in him through whatever situation that you guys are facing. He's got a plan. He's got a purpose. Sometimes it's sin, and we've caused that in this broken world, but he can. To his people who love him, he can work those things around for his ultimate good. Our job is just to trust in him. Our job is to cling to him. And I'll just finish with the verse I already read before, Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose. And I just want to end it with that, you guys. I don't know where you are. I don't know how difficult your situation is. But this is why we come together and we meet. We should encourage each other. We should push each other along. This world is hard. Talk to people throughout the week, and I know this world is hard. Sometimes it's hard for people just to get here. It's difficult. Sometimes people are just in pain, and they're just hurting, and they're just, things have just overcome their life, And that's where the church, that's all of us. So we need to reach out to each other. I encourage you guys to do that. As a church family with each other, let's reach out to each other. Let's be there for each other. It's not about just coming here and showing our presence. It's like, you know what, we're in this broken world together. Some of us are in the middle of that crazy 13-year period like we see with Joseph there. And we don't know what's going to happen. And we're scared and we're blinded by everything else. And that's when the church needs to just swarm in there with the love of God and tell people about Christ and just be there for each other. I just want to encourage you guys with that. Whatever you're going through, cling to God. Do not turn away from him.